My beloved child, stop scrolling for just a moment, because what you are about to hear was meant to reach the part of your heart that has been quietly asking questions no one else can answer. Do not rush past this. Something has been building beneath the surface, something your eyes could not see and your ears could not hear, yet your spirit may have sensed it in those strange quiet moments when a certain person suddenly entered your thoughts without warning. There is a reason this message feels different. There is a reason these words have found you now. In this fictional spiritual story, imagine heaven drawing back a curtain and allowing you to witness a conversation that has been happening inside your soulmate's heart. I cannot keep this secret any longer. You deserve to know everything. Those words were not born in a moment of excitement. They came after nights of hesitation, unfinished messages, silent prayers, and a truth that became too heavy to carry alone. Stay with me, because the secret is not simply about what your soulmate feels. It reaches deeper than that, and before this message is over, you will understand why they waited, why they pulled back, and why something inside them is finally saying that silence can no longer continue. There was a time when they believed keeping this hidden was the safest choice. They convinced themselves that silence would protect you, protect them, and protect everything that had not yet been given a name. They told themselves they could manage the feelings privately. They believed that if they remained calm enough, busy enough, distant enough, eventually the intensity would fade. But what they did not expect was that every attempt to forget only made certain memories clearer. Every time they tried to move forward without addressing what was inside them, some small reminder seemed to bring everything back. A song. A familiar phrase. A place that reminded them of a conversation. A quiet evening when the world became still and there was nothing left to distract them from the truth. And slowly, something changed. What they had treated as a passing emotion began to feel like an unfinished chapter. What they had dismissed as coincidence began to feel impossible to ignore. Yet even then, they did not speak, because the first layer of this secret was guarded by something stronger than pride. It was guarded by fear of being misunderstood. Listen closely, beloved child, because this is where the story begins to turn. Your soulmate was not only hiding feelings. They were hiding the depth of what those feelings had caused them to realize about themselves. That distinction matters. Loving someone in imagination is easy. Admitting that someone has awakened a part of you that changes how you see your future is far more difficult. Somewhere along the way, this person began asking questions they had never asked before. Why do certain connections stay in the heart even when circumstances change? Why does one person's presence make every other conversation feel strangely incomplete? Why does the thought of losing a connection that was never fully defined hurt more than it logically should? They tried answering those questions with reason, but reason alone could not settle them. And this is where the secret grew. They began to understand that what frightened them was not simply the possibility of loving you. What frightened them was the possibility that their life would no longer feel honest if they kept pretending they did not. Do not skip this next part, because there is something hidden inside their silence that you may have misread. There were moments when you could have interpreted their distance as indifference. There may have been times when their quietness made it appear that they had moved on, forgotten, or simply stopped caring. But in this story, the opposite was happening beneath the surface. The more meaningful the connection became, the more careful they became with it. They questioned every word before speaking it. They imagined how you might respond. They worried that saying too little would lose you and saying too much would overwhelm you. They rehearsed conversations that never happened. They formed sentences in their mind and then erased them before those sentences ever became messages. They even imagined telling you everything at once, only to stop themselves because they were afraid that one honest conversation could change the shape of both your lives. That is why this moment matters. Something has shifted inside them. The fear of speaking is still there, but another fear has become greater, the fear that they may wait until the opportunity is gone. And there is another layer you deserve to hear. Your soulmate has been carrying regret, but perhaps not the regret you would expect. They are not only regretting the things they said. They are regretting all the things they never allowed themselves to say. They remember small moments you may have forgotten. A look that lasted half a second longer than usual. A conversation that ended too soon. A moment when you needed reassurance and they wanted to give it but held back. They remember occasions when they almost confessed something personal, then changed the subject because vulnerability felt too dangerous. They remember the times they wanted to ask whether you felt the same strange pull, yet they chose silence because the answer mattered too much. This is the secret beginning to unravel. Your soulmate's quietness was not empty. It was crowded with unsent words. And some of those words have been waiting much longer than you imagine. Pause here and notice the emotional weight of this. Sometimes the greatest secrets are not dramatic events hidden behind locked doors. Sometimes the greatest secret is an entire inner world another person never allowed you to see. Imagine discovering that while you were wondering whether you mattered, someone else was wondering whether they could ever tell you how much you mattered. Imagine learning that the moments you thought were ordinary had been replayed in another person's mind again and again. Imagine realizing that your name had appeared in private prayers, late-night thoughts, and future possibilities you never knew existed. That is the territory this story is entering now. Yet do not assume you already know everything, because their feelings are only the doorway. Behind that doorway is a decision they have been quietly approaching, and that decision is the reason the words, "You deserve to know everything," have become impossible for them to suppress. For a long time, they thought there would always be another chance. Another day. Another conversation. Another perfectly timed moment when everything would feel easier. But life has a way of exposing the illusion of endless time. Something recently caused them to realize that waiting does not guarantee safety, sometimes waiting only creates distance. Perhaps it was seeing how quickly circumstances can change. Perhaps it was hearing something that reminded them you have your own life, your own choices, your own future. Perhaps it was simply waking one morning with the sudden awareness that they could not keep expecting you to understand feelings they had never clearly expressed. Whatever awakened this realization, it became a turning point. The secret that once felt safer hidden now feels dangerous to keep. Not dangerous in a fearful sense, but dangerous because silence can quietly destroy possibilities that honesty might have saved. And beloved child, there is a phrase they keep circling back to in their mind: "You should have heard this from me sooner." That sentence holds more than one meaning. It carries apology. It carries courage. It carries the recognition that you may have been forced to guess when you deserved clarity. Your soulmate has begun to understand that keeping someone uncertain can create wounds even when harm was never intended. They may not have been trying to confuse you, yet hesitation has consequences. Distance can look like rejection. Silence can look like disinterest. Unspoken love can feel exactly like no love at all to the person standing on the other side of it. And this realization has humbled them. They are no longer thinking only about what confession might cost them. They are beginning to think about what continued silence may have cost you. Stay until the end of this part, because one detail changes the entire emotional meaning of what they have been hiding. Your soulmate once believed they needed to become completely certain before speaking. They wanted certainty about timing, certainty about circumstances, certainty about how you would respond, certainty about whether everything would work. But they have learned that human hearts rarely receive that kind of perfect guarantee. There is always risk in honesty. There is always vulnerability in revealing something that matters. And this realization has pushed them toward a new understanding. Perhaps courage is not waiting until fear disappears. Perhaps courage is telling the truth while your hands are still trembling. That thought has been following them. It has entered their quietest moments. And now their secret no longer feels like something they possess. It feels like something they owe you the chance to understand. But here is where the revelation becomes more personal. They have not only been hiding what they feel about you. They have been hiding what they imagine with you. There is a future picture they have rarely admitted, even to themselves. In that picture, the connection is no longer undefined. There is no guessing. There is no emotional distance. There is no constant wondering about what the other person means. There is honesty. There is companionship. There is the strange comfort of being understood without having to perform. They imagine conversations where they no longer censor themselves. They imagine being able to tell you about the parts of their life they normally keep private. They imagine laughter, disagreements that do not destroy closeness, ordinary days that feel meaningful simply because they are shared. And perhaps the most surprising part is that the picture is not built around some dramatic fantasy. It is built around peace. The thing they secretly desire most with you is not chaos, obsession, or endless intensity. It is the peace of finally being truthful. That is why some of their recent behavior may have felt contradictory. One moment they seemed emotionally near, the next, unexpectedly distant. One moment they wanted to speak, the next, they disappeared into thought. This was not necessarily a game. In this fictional narrative, imagine a heart repeatedly stepping toward a door and then stepping back because opening it would make everything real. Every time your soulmate moved closer, the secret rose to the surface. Every time it rose, they felt exposed. So they retreated, hoping distance would restore control. Yet something unexpected happened. Distance did not restore control. It only made the truth louder. They began missing conversations before they even happened. They wondered what you were doing during ordinary parts of the day. They noticed how easily your name could change their mood. And the more they tried to minimize the connection, the more undeniable it became that pretending was exhausting them. Something huge is waiting beneath the next layer, because there was one particular moment when the wall inside them began to crack. It was not necessarily a dramatic event visible to anyone else. It could have happened while they were alone. Perhaps they looked at an old message. Perhaps they remembered something you said with kindness when they did not expect kindness. Perhaps they realized you had seen a part of them that others overlooked. Whatever the trigger, they suddenly understood that what they feared losing was not an idea. It was you. Not perfection. Not fantasy. You, with your imperfections, your history, your quiet strengths, your questions, your own complicated journey. And in that moment they could no longer reduce this connection to curiosity. The truth became emotionally specific. They were not afraid of losing someone. They were afraid of losing the possibility of knowing you more deeply, yet there is another reason they delayed, and this may surprise you. Part of them believed you deserved someone who arrived without confusion. Someone who had everything figured out. Someone who would not make you question where you stood. They looked at their own uncertainties and wondered whether revealing their feelings would be selfish. So they tried to stay away while they sorted themselves out. But distance brought them another realization. Deciding what you deserve without allowing you to know the truth is still making a decision on your behalf. They began to understand that respect means giving another person clarity and allowing them to choose for themselves. They do not get to decide your answer before you hear the question. They do not get to assume rejection and call it protection. They do not get to hide forever and expect fate to solve what honesty requires them to face. This is why the sentence has changed inside them. It used to be, maybe one day I will tell you. Now it has become, I cannot keep this secret any longer. Feel the difference. The first sentence waits for life to create courage. The second recognizes that courage must be chosen. The first hides behind tomorrow. The second acknowledges that tomorrow is not promised in the way we often imagine. And your soulmate has reached the point where emotional truth is becoming more important than emotional comfort. They are tired of speaking around what they mean. Tired of wondering whether you noticed. Tired of trying to interpret your silence while expecting you to interpret theirs. Something inside them wants the guessing to end. Beloved child, do not confuse this story with a promise that another person's actions are predetermined. This is a fictional spiritual narration about honesty, courage, and the emotional power of revealing what has been hidden. And within that story, heaven's message to you is equally important. Your worth does not depend on whether someone confesses, chooses, returns, or understands you. You do not have to chase a secret out of another person's heart. You do not have to prove that you are worthy of clarity. Real connection cannot be built entirely from signs, hints, and unanswered questions. Eventually truth must become words, choices, and consistent actions. So while this story reveals the turmoil inside your soulmate, it is also preparing you for something deeper. If truth arrives, you are allowed to listen without abandoning your discernment. You are allowed to feel deeply without surrendering your peace. And you are allowed to ask whether someone's actions can carry the weight of what their words claim. This is where the spiritual lesson begins to rise through the mystery. Some connections enter our lives to teach us how to love another person. Others teach us how not to lose ourselves while loving them. Sometimes the breakthrough is not simply hearing, "I love you." Sometimes the breakthrough is finally understanding that love without clarity can leave both people trapped inside separate stories. Your soulmate's secret has forced them to confront their fear of vulnerability. Your uncertainty may have forced you to confront your fear of being forgotten. And perhaps both journeys are moving toward the same threshold: truth without manipulation, closeness without chasing, affection without losing dignity. That is far more powerful than a dramatic confession because it asks both hearts to become mature enough to hold what they once only dreamed about. Still, there is something your soulmate has not said yet, something connected to the exact moment they first realized you were different from everyone else. They remember it with surprising clarity. The strange part is that you probably would not recognize that moment as significant at all. You may have done something ordinary. You may have offered a sentence of encouragement. You may have listened when others interrupted. You may have looked at them without judgment during a moment when they felt unseen. Whatever happened, something inside them quietly registered it. They did not call it love. They did not call it destiny. They simply noticed that they felt different after being around you. Calmer. More exposed. More understood. And because those feelings arrived together, they frightened them. Being understood sounds beautiful until someone begins seeing the parts of you that you carefully hide. They started noticing details. The way you responded when someone else needed kindness. The way you carried yourself when things did not go your way. The way your energy changed when you were tired but still tried to show up for others. They noticed contradictions in you too, strength beside sensitivity, independence beside a longing to be genuinely known. And each detail made their secret more difficult to dismiss. This was not merely attraction to an image. They were becoming attached to the person beneath the surface. Yet the closer that recognition came, the more intensely they questioned themselves. Was this real? Were they imagining it? Would you ever see them the same way? Would telling you ruin the bond they already had? Questions multiplied until the secret became surrounded by a fortress of uncertainty. But fortresses built around feelings eventually become prisons for the person who built them. Your soulmate learned that slowly. They thought walls would protect them from disappointment, but the walls also prevented them from experiencing clarity. They thought withholding truth meant preserving control, yet they felt less in control with every passing day. And perhaps that is the hidden paradox you were meant to hear. Sometimes the secret we protect most fiercely becomes the very thing that controls us. Your soulmate reached a point where their unspoken truth began shaping decisions, moods, and expectations without ever being acknowledged openly. That is when they realized something had to change. Stay with this, because their next realization was even more unsettling for them. They began imagining you moving forward without them. Not as punishment. Not as a dramatic tragedy. Simply as life. They imagined you meeting people who were willing to say what they felt. They imagined you receiving the consistency they had been too afraid to offer. They imagined you slowly stopping wondering about them because eventually unanswered questions lose their power when a person chooses peace. That image struck them differently. For the first time, they saw the cost of hesitation from your perspective. And it forced them to ask themselves a question they had avoided: if I stay silent and they walk away believing they never mattered to me, can I live with that? The answer surprised them. No. Not comfortably. Because even if telling you changed nothing, at least truth would replace confusion. At least you would know that the connection was not imagined by only one heart. At least they would stop allowing fear to write the ending. This was the beginning of their internal decision. But there was still one thing holding them back. The secret contained more than a confession of affection. It contained an explanation. They knew that if they spoke, you might ask why they waited so long. Why they acted distant. Why they sometimes seemed certain and uncertain at the same time. Why they gave signals they could not sustain. And to answer those questions honestly, they would have to reveal something about their own past that they had carefully kept hidden. Now the mystery deepens. This hidden part of their story is not presented here as something sinister or dangerous. It is emotional. It is personal. It explains why closeness has sometimes made them retreat. Before you entered their inner world, they had already learned certain lessons about vulnerability, and not all those lessons were gentle. They had experienced disappointment that taught them to associate openness with loss. Somewhere inside them was a belief that if they revealed too much, they would eventually regret it. So when feelings for you grew stronger, an old instinct activated: protect yourself first. The problem was that you were not the person who originally taught them to fear closeness, yet you were experiencing the consequences of that fear. They know this now. And that knowledge carries guilt. They realize there may have been moments when you questioned yourself because of walls you did not build. You may have wondered whether you said something wrong when they suddenly became quiet. You may have wondered whether you were asking for too much simply because you wanted consistency. But the secret explanation is that your presence brought them face to face with emotional patterns they had avoided for years. You did not create those patterns. You exposed them. And sometimes the person who reveals our unhealed habits can feel both deeply comforting and deeply unsettling at the same time. Yet your soulmate does not want to hide behind their past anymore. That is part of what "you deserve to know everything" means. They understand that explanation is not the same as excuse. They cannot simply say, "I was afraid," and expect every confusing moment to disappear. They know trust may require patience. They know words cannot instantly repair every gap. They know confession is only the beginning. And strangely, that realization has made them more ready to speak, not less. Earlier they imagined confession as some magical moment that would solve everything. Now they understand something more mature: truth opens the door, but consistent action determines what happens after the door is opened. Perhaps this is why their heart feels restless now. They are standing at a threshold between who they were and who they are trying to become. Behind them is the version of themselves who escaped difficult conversations, hid feelings until they became unbearable, and waited for others to understand what was never clearly spoken. Ahead is the possibility of becoming someone who says, "This is what I feel. This is what I feared. This is where I failed to communicate." And this is what I hope we can understand together. That shift is enormous. It requires them to release control over your response. They must tell the truth without knowing whether you will welcome it, question it, need time, or choose a different path. And that may be the hardest part of all. Beloved child, there is also something you must release, the belief that every mystery needs to be solved before you can have peace. Sometimes peace comes first. Sometimes clarity arrives after you stop chasing it. You are allowed to let another person's truth reveal itself through their choices rather than exhausting yourself trying to decode every silence. This story can be emotionally powerful without asking you to suspend wisdom. If someone truly wants you to know everything, eventually they must be willing to communicate everything that matters with honesty and respect. You can remain open while still grounded. You can hope without making hope your only evidence. You can care without putting your life on hold. And strangely, that is exactly the energy your soulmate is beginning to recognize in you. They sense that you are becoming less willing to live inside uncertainty. Perhaps they notice a change in your energy, the way you no longer reach quite as far into spaces that do not reach back. Perhaps they sense you learning to protect your peace without closing your heart. That change has affected them because it has removed something they unconsciously depended on, the assumption that you would always remain emotionally available while they decided what to do. They are realizing that love does not mean endless waiting. They are realizing that meaningful people can become memories when courage arrives too late. This is why the secret is pressing against the surface now. They are no longer asking only, "What if I tell them?" They are asking, "What if I never do?" And the second question terrifies them more. They imagine carrying this truth years into the future, wondering what might have happened if they had simply been honest. They imagine hearing that you have built a beautiful life and feeling genuinely happy for you while privately remembering that there was once a door they never had the courage to open. That possibility has become unbearable enough to challenge their fear. But the strongest part of their secret has still not been revealed. Because beneath the affection, beneath the regret, beneath the history that taught them to hide, there is one promise they made privately about you. They never told you about it. They may never have told anyone. It was formed during a moment when they believed they had already lost their chance. In that moment, they promised themselves that if life ever created another opening, another genuine opportunity to speak without pretending, they would not waste it. They would tell you what they had hidden. They would tell you why they pulled away. They would tell you what changed inside them after meeting you. And most importantly, they would tell you the one truth they had been most afraid you would hear. That truth is closer now than it has ever been in this story. Something inside them has already begun rehearsing the conversation. They imagine starting simply. No dramatic performance. No perfect speech. Just honesty. There is something I should have told you a long time ago. Then there would be a pause because even in imagination, saying the next sentence is difficult. They would watch your expression. They would wonder whether you already knew. They would wonder whether you were angry, relieved, surprised, or completely calm. Then they would finally say the words that have waited behind every unfinished message, "I did not distance myself because you meant nothing. I distanced myself because you started meaning more than I knew how to handle. But even that is not the full secret. No, beloved child. That is only the confession that opens the door. Behind it is the reason they believed they had to keep their feelings hidden from you in the first place, and it involves a choice they made quietly when your connection was beginning to deepen. A choice you may never have known happened. A choice that changed the direction of everything that came afterward. They thought they were protecting the future. Instead, they may have delayed the very thing their heart wanted most. And now they are looking back at that choice differently. They are beginning to understand that what they decided then was based on fear, not truth. They have realized something about you that they did not understand when they made that decision. And once they finally admit what that realization is, the words, "I can't keep this secret any longer," will take on an entirely different meaning, because the secret is not merely that they cared. The secret is what they were prepared to give up because they cared. And the moment you discover what that was, everything you thought you understood about their silence may change.